Welcome friends to day 4 of our 28 Days of Pilates challenge. So today we're actually technically not on the mat, we're looking at an exercise off the mat for a little bit of fun, but also just to show you what you can do in a really short space of time without necessarily having to get a mat out and spend lots of time on it. So we have an off the mat challenge today, and your challenge is to do 100 squats over the course of the day. So squats are a really functional move. Now, I do hate that word, it's quite technical, but functional just means it's a really good move that supports a lot of everyday movements, if that makes sense. So it works your hips, it works your glutes, the back of the body, it makes you work your center as well for that overall support. So it's just a really healthy movement for your body. And we actually do a lot of our everyday activities involve a lot of squatting, particularly when we're bending down to stand up as well. So if you do gardening, if you've got kids and you're running around picking up toys after them, or indeed anything like that, housework, then squatting is a really good functional move to keep your body healthy. Now, the great thing about Pilates is you can do less of these exercises when you focus on technique, things like precision, control, alignment, and you get more from the exercise. So we're not about doing kind of sloppy exercises or sloppy versions of anything. We're about focusing on form, we're about focusing on precision and all the connections in the body to make that a really, really efficient move or exercise for you, which means you can do less and benefit more. Okay, so this is the amazing thing about Pilates. So like I say, we're going to do squats. I'm asking you to do 100, but it is 100 based on whatever level you are at. So if maybe you're new to Pilates and something like focusing on form and precision is new to you, then do less. Maybe do a quarter of that. Maybe think about doing 25. Focus more on the form and all the things I'm going to talk you through now over trying to do 100. But if you've been doing Pilates for a while and you know about things like alignment and form and precision and control, then you're going to be able to smash out 100, no issue at all. It's up to you how you want to do them. You've got to slot them into your day, just today. So you can do them all in one go, or you can split them out. You could do 10 lots of 10 over the course of a day. You decide, you could do less than that, you could do more, you could do 2 lots of 50. It's totally up to you. Just see if you can sneak them into your day in a way that works for you. Maybe it's like when you're on the phone, maybe it's when you're watching the news or something like that. Just something that allows you to move and maybe do something else in your day. And you can, again, you're just going to see how easy it is to do little things that are so good and so healthy for you. Super important. So let's take a quick look at squat techniques as you're all set to do a really good, healthy, functional squat, a really efficient squat. You're going to join me on the mat if you're not already there. So that said, join me on the mat. I've actually moved my mat away because, as you probably know, when I'm doing standing stuff, I actually quite like to feel my feet. I like to feel grounded and connected to the floor. So I've put my mat away. So to do a really good squat, you're going to think about parallel with the legs. You're going to be hip width or thereabouts. So this is really important. If you are somebody that tends to be tight through your hips and through your quadriceps, through the front of your thighs, then you can take the legs wider than at hip distance, and you can also turn your legs out slightly. So that's really important. A lot of the times we hear people saying, oh, you're going to be hip width and parallel. You absolutely don't. You've got to find a way in the squat that works for you, that allows you to do it properly. So, and you want to get into your inner range hip as well. So if you turn out a little bit and you come wider than hip distance, try both versions. So try parallel and see if that works for you. And if you turn out a little bit and become wider than hip distance, try that as well and notice the difference. For me, I've got to be a little bit wider than hip distance and a little bit turned out as well to allow me to drop down into my hips, okay? So that's the first thing to think about, so give that a try. You've got to think about your position in there, your alignment. So what else can I tell you? Outside of that, you want to think about the sequence of movement in a squat, okay? So if you're new to squatting and movement and you're not really sure what a squat is, which absolutely fine, some people don't, it's this move here where we send the bum back. So when the bum goes back, the sit bones widen. You're going to connect your center here and arms come forward, chin in line with your breastbones. You're keeping that nice extension in the spine, and then you press to come back up to open the hips. So that's a squat. So the sequence of movement is important to pay attention to. The first thing that moves when you do a squat are your hips. So you bend at your hips, you flex at your hips, and you send your bum back. If you're new to squatting or you've never been spoken through proper technique, sometimes what I see that happens quite a lot is somebody starts the movement from their knees. Now, that's no good, because the first thing that you want to load are your hips. If you're loading your knees first, that's going to cause you a world of pain. So it's all about the hips in a squat. So you've got to bend from the hips, flex on the hips, send your bum back, sit bones widen. So as the hips are loaded and activated first, and then the forces transfer through the lower limbs properly. You don't want to load the knees first. That's really, really important. A really fragile joint. You definitely don't want to be transferring all the forces through the lower body, definitely through the knee. So, hips first. So you're going to squat, send your bum back, arms forward, and then you're going to come back up. Now, this is important. When you come back up, you've got to finish the move. So you've got to open the hips fully. This is what we call hip extension. This is just a standing pose. A lot of people will just get into the squat and they'll come up and down and they'll do it really quickly and they'll not finish the move. They'll not fully extend their hips. So in this exercise, we are trying to move through our hip range of motion here. So from the full outer range here, all the way to your inner range, you want to go as low as you can in your squat. That's why coming wider than hip distance and turning out slightly can be better for you if you're tight in the hips, because it will allow you to get down to the ground a little bit more lower, and then you're getting more into your inner range hip here, okay? So that's important too. The other thing to remember is your alignment. So whatever version you're doing, the knees are always tracking in line with the toes. So hip, knee and ankle alignment is super important. You can always quickly check in on that. The other thing to think about is the thighs. So what's happening through the thighs. So you've got to think, as you squat down, think of the thighs, the muscles around the hip, almost spiraling outwards. So as you are activating around the muscles of the hip, but also the muscles around the inner thighs, and the glutes as well. So think of a spiraling idea, and that helps prevent the knees rolling in as well. It just activates the outside edges that you want to activate, that you want to help drive that lovely sequence of movement. So moving from the hips first, knees, and then back up. Okay, so think about that spiraling. If you've got any questions, please contact me if you think, oh my goodness, what's she talking about? The other thing to think about is what happens through the low back. So you've got to keep your rib to hip connection. So think about braces, a set of braces. I'll often say this. So you've got a little brace on your last rib. It attaches to the top of your pelvis, so your two hip bones. So you're staying connected rib to hip. Got to keep that connection as you squat, okay? If you don't keep that connection and the ribs flare, if you watch my back, you'll see my lumbar spine over arches. So then I would be in a lumbar extension, which is no good. You don't want that. If you're doing that repeatedly, you're going to create pain in your back and hips. You don't want that. So think about that rib to hip connection as well through the front of the body. So as you're staying nice and neutral in the pelvis. And the other thing to think about is what happens if you tuck under. So we know that this is an anterior tilt of the pelvis, forward tilt of the pelvis, but sometimes when we squat, we can tuck under and we can lose our curve in our back as well. And that's no good either. That's going to cause you a little bit of issue in your hips and things as well. So think about that centering and that movement from the hip, that kind of line going this way, sit bones widen, okay? So think about that. The other thing that can cause the posterior tilt, so this losing the lumbar curve, the tailbone tucking under, is overactivating your glutes. Now, I've been guilty of this. You'll hear it a lot online. The cue, squeeze your glutes. So you don't need to squeeze any muscle ever. In Pilates, what we are looking for is efficient activation, efficient use of your muscles. They need to be on to support you relative to whatever it is you're doing. You never need to squeeze them. When you squeeze your glutes, especially in something like this, you're going to force yourself out of neutral and into a posterior tuck. You're going to open your hips in the front, your femoral head, so the head of the thigh bone will start to push forward in the socket, and you're training all the wrong movement patterns and all the wrong sequences in your body there. That's going to cause you, again, pain in the hip, which will transfer down through the joints, pain in your back as well. So no squeezing. Squeezing forces this, the tucking, and the over pushing, the pushing out of your, and then what you'll do is, of your hip bones, of your thigh bones, and what you'll do is you'll train those muscles to be on like that all the time, and they'll end up holding you like that out of neutral and with the thigh bones facing forward. So that's a little tip. Efficient lunge. We're thinking about just pressing down. You want to drop in as evenly or as deeply as you can to the hips. There comes a point where you won't be able to go any lower because you might lose all of those connections we've just spoken about. When that happens, you just come back up. Remember, we're finishing the move. Okay, so it's sit bones widen, connecting here, reaching forward, reach your arms forward, press equally into the feet. And then stand back up. Press into the base of the big toe and then think of a diagonal line back to the outside edge of your heel. So again, transferring the weight evenly to support you through the feet is really important too. So like I say, there's a lot to think about there, but if you focus on these things, watch this video a couple of times. Remember, you don't have to do 100. You're just going to focus on doing however many you can do today with really good form and technique. And if you're new, this is probably a lot to take in. But I promise you, if you focus on this, this is how we get the most out of the exercises in Pilates. So 100 squats today, give or take, focusing on form, position control, alignment, all those things that I've spoken about, correct muscle activation. And I want you to jump into our Facebook group if you're in the group. Share any pictures, let us know how many you've done, how you found it, if you found this video useful. And I will see you back on your mat for more Pilates tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.